All right, so today's video is going to be a little bit of an extension off my last video about the big barbell compound movements, the big three. So today what we're going to get into a little bit is just, as you can tell by the title, clarifying the difference between an accessory movement and an isolation movement. And there is a very big difference, and I do want to basically explain my thoughts on this, not just on the difference between the two of them, but how to actually implement them and how to actually think about these movements to make your training a little bit more optimal and overcoming some misconceptions with this stuff. So I just want to say that this video kind of does apply to a lot of people. It's not necessarily just beginners, even though a lot of beginners do mess this up, as we all know. We've all been there, not to call out beginners in particular. I've been there. I was a beginner for a while. We all have been at some point. We all have to be at some point. So this applies to intermediate and even some advanced lifters as well. I see it happen all the time where lifters just don't quite understand the difference between an isolation and an accessory. So let's get into that now. The biggest misconception about an isolation movement is that any movement that targets one muscle in particular is an isolation. This just isn't the case. Let's take let's say some type of back row, for example, like a dumbbell row, one arm row, even a lat pull down or something. A lot of people will call that an isolation movement. This is more of an accessory movement. I'll explain that in a second. So an isolation movement is going to be a movement that uses one joint, not necessarily just one muscle that it's focused on, because there's really no such thing as an isolation movement based on how many muscles you're using, because even if you're doing a bicep curl, your forearm's still working, your core has to work to an extent. There's basically no way around that. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's not really going to grow your forearm. It's not really going to grow your core, but you're not actually isolating that muscle. What an accessory movement is, that is a movement that's designed to help you strengthen up a weakness or an area that's involved with another movement that's your primary goal to improve on. So let's see, what do I have here? Let's see. So, yeah, trying to measure movement by the muscles that are being used is nearly impossible because there's really no clear line. It's a little bit subjective, and that basically makes that entire view of training subjective because, like I said, there's certain isolations, especially as you get more advanced, that you will have to have other muscles be involved with. Anybody that's gotten strong with your pushing movements, you know, when you first started out doing, let's say, a cable tricep pushdown, very easy, your triceps would burn out real quick at the start of the movement. Now that you're stronger, yeah, maybe you do tire your triceps out a bit, but sure enough, your core starts to burn out too. Your core will kind of start to fail maybe before your triceps do. If you're strong enough on that movement, that's actually a problem that I faced when I got into that late intermediate, early advanced portion of my training. So let's see. That's definitely very subjective to measure just based on the muscles that are being used. So yeah, the ability to isolate those muscles decreases with strength gain. And this is one of those things that's kind of branching off my last video. Getting stronger isn't necessarily the best thing, especially as you start to get bigger numbers in the squat, bench, and deadlift, and just overall bigger compound movements for bodybuilding, because you end up getting so strong that you can't target those muscles without a little bit of help from other areas, if that makes sense. Anybody that's an advanced lifter or late intermediate, you've probably been there, maybe not entirely sure what's going on, but it's a pretty big problem that I see with a lot of intermediate and advanced lifters. So let's get into the accessories a bit. So like I said earlier, an accessory movement is an exercise that complements and helps build another lift. This is a staple to powerlifting, not to bodybuilding. There's really no such thing as an accessory movement for bodybuilding. But let's just leave it at that. So I really don't like the term accessory because it makes it seem like a less important or like it's just one small piece to a bigger movement that you're focusing on. And performance is ultimately not the end goal in bodybuilding. That's not to say progression's not important or doesn't play some type of role, but if progression is your main goal in the gym and you're just trying to get as strong as possible, you're probably sacrificing a couple extra variables that are very important to muscle hypertrophy. And I will have a video on that. Right now I have an 8-page Google Doc of like 25 different videos. So I'll go a lot more in depth on that. That's going to be a big video of mine at some point this week. So let's see. An accessory movement is also very subjective because your goal doesn't necessarily have to be squat, bench, deadlift. So let's say, for example, you're trying to get stronger on dips. That's your primary movement. Now, to get stronger at dips, what's a good other compound exercise to actually build your dip strength? I would say a barbell bench press. So do you see where that gets a little bit arbitrary? Where now technically my barbell bench press is an accessory movement. Pretty arbitrary, very subjective, that's for sure. So to clear the air up on that a little bit, that's all I'd really want to say for that. I don't want to make this overly confusing or complex. So the takeaway that I want you guys to have from this video is you should base your movements on the joints that are involved, not the muscles. That will determine the difference between a regular compound movement and an isolation movement. Let's see. So I will make some in-depth videos on my training program and how I made it in the future. I do not plan on selling this. I plan on just making it for free. I actually have it like 75% done on a Google Doc, and I'll just put the link in the description. But yeah, I just want to make this free and give it out to everybody. You can get a taste of what my training's like. It's nothing too crazy, but I do have a pretty good idea, and I've been on this pretty successful program that I've made a lot of gains on recently. So I want to make sure I can give that out back to people. So other than that, that's all I've got for the video today. I know it was kind of a shorter one, just a little segment off of my last video last week. And yeah, with that being said, that's all I got. Stay tuned for this week. I'm going to have probably about one upload every day of bigger videos going much more in depth on much more exciting topics. So stay tuned, and those will be coming this week.